The most frequent injury that we see as a result of a motor vehicle accident is spinal injuries. One of the things that's very important to know about spinal injuries is that your attorney needs to know the spine and the associated injuries, as well as the doctors, and certainly better than the insurance company's lawyers. In handling thousands of these cases over the years, our attorneys here, we have tried these cases. We have had special meetings with many of the neurosurgeons and orthopedic spine surgeons in Buffalo, Western New York, and we've educated ourselves on the nature and extent of injuries associated with the spine. Oftentimes what happens after an accident is people will go to the hospital. At the hospital, what will happen if they have a spinal injury is they'll take an x-ray. The x-ray is a diagnostic tool that is used to determine whether or not there's been any bone injury to the spinal vertebrae themselves, depicted in white on this model. Oftentimes we don't see those types of injuries. At the hospital, individuals are typically provided with some medication, maybe a painkiller, maybe some muscle relaxants, told to go home, ice it or heat it, and then to call their primary doctors. The problem with the x-ray is that the area in between these vertebrae, which is known as the discs, is not depicted in an x-ray. And those are the areas where we typically see the injuries. The spine is made up of three major component parts. The cervical spine, which is at the top, the thoracic spine, in the middle, which is where your ribs attach, and then lower spine, which is the lumbar spine. And behind here, you will see there is a spinal cord running down the spine until you get to what we call L1, which is the first lumbar vertebrae. And at that point, the spinal cord actually stops and becomes a thing called the cauda equina. It kind of striates out. What we need to do, and what you need to do if you're involved in an accident, and I tell my clients this, forget about the fact that there's a personal injury case. You need to find out what's wrong with you, so when you're 20 years from now, you're not walking around like someone who's 40 years older than you are right now. You got to find out what's wrong with you. And you only have a limited amount of time under the system to do so. What we're looking for is to see if there is any damage to this area in here, which is the disc. Now, the disc is an interesting part of the body because it is, generally speaking, non-vascular. It doesn't have blood supply to it, or very minimal blood supply to it. It's made of two component parts, or major component parts. The inside of the disc is called the nucleus pulposus. The outside of the disc is called the annulus. What we're looking for is to see if that nucleus pulposus, which is a jelly-like substance on the inside of the disc, is pushing out of the disc. Now, once it does that, there are certain things that we have to look for, and that determines whether or not that disc is going to cause certain types of injuries or certain types of problems. If we take a look at the side, we would call this a sagittal view in an X-ray or an MRI. You can see here that there are these little fingers sticking out here, and there is a hole that they're going through. That hole is called the foramen. The foramen is just a Latin term for the word window. It's a bony window that allows the nerve to come out of the spinal cord and run through the window. What we need to find out is a couple of things. We need to know if that disc is either bulging or herniating or protruding or extruding, whatever term we want to use. We want to know if that disc is pushing into that window, into that foramen, and shutting the window down. Because if it shuts the window down, we can look at the foramen, we can look at the nerve and the disc. If the disc is shutting the window down, it then impacts on the nerve. It causes what we call foraminal stenosis. It impinges on the nerve, and when it impinges on the nerve, it creates a thing called radiculopathy. People have heard of sciatic pain. That is a form of radiculopathy at a very specific nerve root, L5S1. But that can happen in any one of these nerve roots. So if you have a C4, C5, or C5, C6 radiculopathy, foraminal compression, parts of the arm will start going numb. And based on what symptom you're having in your hand or in your leg, we can determine which of these nerves is being affected. The other thing that can happen is that it can cause spinal stenosis. Now picture that disc is pushing backwards as opposed to the side. If it's pushing backwards, it will shorten or narrow the canal that your spinal cord is running in. And it causes not foraminal stenosis, but spinal stenosis. And if that happens, you can get much of the same type of symptomatology, meaning you'll get extremity problems, clumsiness, problems into the legs, problems into, oftentimes, people who have severe problems in terms of what we call myelopathy, will have difficulty with urinating, difficulty with defecating. It can get pretty severe. The chiropractors who are dealing with these types of injuries typically deal with subluxations, which means these vertebrae can pop out of place, and they will try to manipulate them to get them back into place and take the pressure off of those nerve roots. We also see oftentimes doctors, we see physical therapists to try to build up the musculature around the area. We see neurologists who will prescribe medications to allow the nerves to operate and function properly even if there is a problem. Pain management doctors who will do injection therapies, things like that. And ultimately, if there is a problem that cannot be corrected as a result of conservative treatment, the next thing that people need to go to is see an orthopedic spine surgeon or neurosurgeon. Those orthopedic spine surgeons or neurosurgeons are engaged, obviously, in surgery. And oftentimes what they will do is they will surgically go in and either take part of the disc out or the whole disc out or replace the disc. There's a number of different types of surgeries that are available. We at this law office have handled thousands of these cases. We know the medicine, and again, knowing the medicine is an extremely important part if you're going to go into a trial in front of a jury so you can explain these concepts to the jury.